show you a place where you gon' wanna move your feet.
Well, welcome to our episode 3 of Commission Conundrum, walking you through muddy waters. And we're here to talk a little bit about how we got here. How did we get to this place with compensation and agency and all the different things that happened with the lawsuit? So we're going to go way back a little bit.
In the way back machine, back to Y2K-ish. At the time, there was actually no buyer agency. Every agent that was working with a buyer was actually a sub-agent of the seller. And that created a lot of confusion for people. And, the industry worked really hard, and Cheryl was a part of that, trying to bring buyer agency into fruition.
Yeah, so at the time when we were all agents of the seller, basically, whenever we showed the house to the buyer, even though we got to be kind of their best friend and you got to know their kids and you're almost their aunt because you spent so much time being with them in their car, when we went to write an offer, and even before that we should have been saying what the situation was, which was that we were sub-agents of the seller and we owed our fiduciary responsibility to the seller, not to the buyer. So I kind of used to what I called Mirandize my buyer and tell them, listen, when we go out, we find this property. I don't know the seller from a hole in the wall, but but I represent them. So don't tell me anything you don't want me to share with the seller. So I used to kind of cover that with buyers because other than that, it really seemed more natural to be working for the buyer and representing the buyer. And so at the point right around 2005, we did an agency task force that I was a part of with the state of Massachusetts and the Boston board and the Worcester board. We all participated together and came up with a new relationship disclosure form. And so when we did that, we clarified buyer agency and work, so that agents could go out and work with their buyers and for their buyers. Because if you talk to anybody who bought a house before that, they think that their agent represented them, even though they didn't.
They didn't, And so what we did was we, kind of took a little shortcut with a commission because the commission worked very well with sub-agency where the sellers paid their listing broker and that listing broker would then paid out the sub-agents as their co-brokes. It worked very well. It worked with financing and, it was kind of like it works. So don't try to change it. Let's just change the agency piece of things. And we just slid the buyer agency compensation in where the sub-agency compensation used to be. And at that time, it worked great. But I think as we found, some people weren't happy with it. And here we are.
There we are. And so those lawsuits started in 2019. And, most of us have heard more about it in the last year and a half or so, where they've become class action lawsuits and there were more filed and some were decided in favor of the plaintiffs. So we are now still waiting for some sort of a resolution to those. I think there is some bright side to what's going on right now. We are seeing, that the DOJ and different law systems are looking at all the intricacies of what a change might do to our industry. So I'm happy that at least there's some consideration being given to how this works and how it will affect buyers if they completely mess this all up. So So it's looking like they're at least taking some good things into consideration. I know that Bright MLS had just done a study recently that they published, and then they did a newscast or a news announcement and kind of did a live announcement of the findings of that study. And what was interesting is that the findings basically showed that there was no correlation between the compensation offered to the buyer's agent and how many showings or how much activity was, nor was there any correlation between compensation offered and price. And so they probably have the most data that any MLS does out there because they're a very large MLS and they were able to use some very large samples to show definitively how this did not impact pricing or activity. So that's all good stuff.
Yeah, and so, we've been through a lot of changes. Buyer agency replacing sub-agency was a huge change, and a lot of agents were very fearful that it was going to change the market forever and it was going to get rid of, sub-agents and, they'd have to find another job. And so, it's kind of a wash, rinse, repeat. Here we are again. And, I look at this as we've come a long way to representing buyers.
We've come a long way, baby.
We've come a long way, and now we're here. We're going to tweak it. And we're going to be better, and it's going to help the consumers, and then also help us raise the bar in our professionalism.
Yep, more disclosure for the consumer, and that's ultimately I think what this is trying to get at is more disclosure, more clarity for consumers to understand how this works. So we're pretty hopeful that this will all work out great, and we'll get through it just as we did the changes in 2005. And in the meantime, if you need anything, you know where to find us, because we are always here for you.
Almost did it. We almost did it.
What? I said here.